Have you ever had a series of high-stakes, essential tasks to get done within a short window of time? Typically, there are these overlapping must-dos, with this high degree of fidelity, with what feels like a tug between getting it done right and getting it done perfectly. The only catch is this constraint of resources, and a big one of them is time. Hello, I'm Carvel Monroe, and welcome to The Pinch, the production that I deal with struggle, uncertainty, pressure, and ultimately just living by faith. It is kind of what you do when you don't fully know or understand why or what you're facing. So some time ago, there was a well-known TV program called American Gladiator. It featured a number of reoccurring star gladiators who were physically fit and sculpted to fit the role. They look like fighters. So each week, contestants would take on these gladiators in various events, sporting events. And it would all kind of culminate in this activity, as I recall, that they call it the Gauntlet, where contenders would work their way through a series of zones that was guarded by gladiators, who would basically put up resistance to these competitors. And whichever contestant can do it the fastest time wins. This is how I kind of wrote down the description a while back. A physical exercise that is classified as a gauntlet, whereby there are numerous consecutive activities that pushes the limit of one's strength and endurance. A gauntlet typically allows for little, if any, time to rest or recoup between activity, as it is often pitted against a clock or another competitor where completion of the activity is correlated, with the shortest duration. So it is this backdrop that I set this particular episode called, that I want to call this particular part, the Gauntlet-like pinch, right? The capacity for duty. It's where you find yourself in this pinch where you must complete a series of activities with minimal rest in between and a set time to complete it. In this gauntlet, you are not competing against anyone else. It is you and the task in hand. Then it's you and the next task. There's little time to think about the activity you're doing deeply anyhow. Little time to produce perfection. Only that you must produce something that addresses the need or the requirement. What's significant about the gauntlet you encounter is the purpose may not be defined. It's undefined. Not the purpose of what you're doing, but the purpose of you being in such a situation. You know what you must do. You understand the assignment. However, you may recognize that the situation you're in is not an optimal one. In fact, you probably wouldn't set it up for you or someone else this way if you were in charge. So now this becomes one of the clues that what you're doing is not the essential thing, although it's an important for the role that you're in. So let me clarify. The task that you're doing is natural and it's practical. However, the scenario you find yourself in has a spiritual or supernatural origin. That is because those who are called by God and in His will kind of encounter these experiences that are bigger or more significant than what they appear. It's that wax on, wax off moment where the Karate Kid is kind of given a task that seems menial and senseless. However, he's developing these essential skills built into muscle memory that he'll be able to draw on when the time requires it. Similarly, this gauntlet that you're in, it kind of positions you in what seems like irrelevant or conflicting assignments that appear wasteful, foolish, or redundant. But it's building capacity in you, capacity for duty. So let me kind of delineate kind of what it is and what it's not. First, what it's not. It's not a time for perfection. So if you are the type of person who likes to get things just right, just perfect, you're probably going to be really frustrated when you find yourself in this gauntlet. It's not the time for overanalyzation. This is the second one, what it's not. It's not the time for overanalyzation. So if you're that kind of white hat or that black hat person that Edward de Bono categorizes or theorizes, these different kind of personality types where the black hat or the white hat, they're analytical and they want all the details and so on and so forth, you're going to have a terrible time when you're in the gauntlet. Here are 2 or 3 things on what it is, though. It's a time for you to produce, to go with what you have. It's a time to kind of just print something or ship something, so to speak. If time would permit, then there would be no hard deadline. But there's this hard deadline that you can't move. So you kind of got to roll with the punches and produce something. Second, it's a time to trust. It's understanding that understanding may come, but don't wait. Living by faith requires you to move without fully understanding what's going on. So you got to trust the Father, not the process. I know that's a term we like to throw out there, trust the process, but the process sometimes isn't comforting. So trust the Father. Thirdly, it's a time for delayed judgment. And this kind of ties into that process speed. So it's kind of living without seeing the desired results. So you want to delay judgment. So in the TV program I talk about, American Gladiators, contestants would compete and they would give it their all sometime, right? And in the end, not everybody got the results that they wanted. So when you don't see the anticipated results, you can tend to beat up yourself, or you might judge the situation you're in and ridicule it and despise it and complain. As a teacher, I've given my all sometimes to facilitate, differentiate, in order to educate, only to still see some students fall short of the goal. So delay the judgment. The thing about the gauntlet is there's no advance notification that you're about to get in one or that you've been put in one. Or maybe there was and you just kind of missed the memo, because sometimes, life speaks, God speaks one way or another, and sometimes we might have missed it. But sometimes there's no warning per se. It's not announced, but the gauntlet can be tied to maybe a prayer, something you've been asking for, or a dream in your heart that you've been trying to seek. And so now you're put into this gauntlet to kind of prepare you for where you're going or for what will be entrusted to you, right? We know the story of Joseph, or hopefully you do, how he went through a series of things for a time to prepare him for the kind of leadership and influence he would have later in his life. It's like a personal and professional development experience that you're placed in, sometimes unknowingly, by the permission of your Creator. It is training that comes through experiencing, reflecting, and inferring. It's not reading a book and you know it now. So you can feel overwhelmed when you're in this gauntlet, naturally. It is that proverbial drinking from a fire hose. You've heard that term before. There's so much flow that it's impossible to digest it all. You're getting soaked, you're wet, and all you can do is do what you can and let the rest fall where it is. You're in a pinch between task and time for the purpose of being refined. Let me say it one more time. You're in the pinch between task and time for the purpose of being refined. It is learning and training that takes place without clear objectives, and it requires faith and trust to know that there is an objective for the experience that you're encountering. It starts with the belief that you're called by God, and your steps, that is where you are now, and what you're doing, it's ordained or scheduled by God, especially when you tried real hard to get out of it before. So that means that what you're doing is in line with God's purpose, I would say, even though it can feel unpleasant or discomforting. So here's my disclaimer, though. This is not saying intentional wrongdoing is a valid, God-ordained action. And I'm not endorsing or supporting an abusive situation, for example, and saying, endure it. Although people have shared how they have survived such conditions, right? Anyhow, so hopefully I've described to you what I call the gauntlet, the capacity for duty. And if you find yourself in this at any time, just know that there's a greater work being done. And if you sense just an overwhelming feeling or uncertainty about what's happening, take heart and be encouraged.